Afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Ada Arena Speaker Series. I'm Antonio Lucero, and I am the Chief Operations Officer for Conversa Corps. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment and express our condolences and offer our support to all of those affected by Hurricane Helene, and to say that we wish for the safety of all the men and women who are working tirelessly to conduct rescue operations, deliver supplies to the affected communities. We're going to go ahead and give just one last opportunity for those who might be joining us live to get settled in. And while we wait, make sure you visit us at conversacorps.org, connect with us on social media, sign up for our email distro, and check us out on LinkedIn to keep up to date with what we're doing and for future speaker series events. For all of you out there watching today, please feel free to chat in with any comments or questions you may have, and we'll do our best to answer all of you before we wrap up today's show. I also want to give a quick shout out to the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. We wouldn't be able to do this without their support. And for anyone else who has just learned of Ada Arena or is tuning in for the first time, wanting to know a little bit about Ada Arena, we're using this platform to introduce and feature some of our members from Ada Arena and their organizations, their projects, their initiatives. Our goal with this is to spread knowledge and awareness of what's going on around the crisis response in humanitarian communities, as well as to highlight the people, their organizations, and their wonderful mission sets, all collaborating together inside of Ada Arena, which is, of course, a space dedicated to fostering new connections, building partnerships, and improving the world of crisis preparedness and response. So, joining us today is Lead Liaison Officer for a Type 3 Incident Management Team for the state of Montana, Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. He's a retired fire captain and the owner of JT Emergency Management Consulting, Terry Bailey. Terry, thank you for being with us today. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good afternoon. Hey, look, I look forward to this opportunity, maybe share a little bit of knowledge, maybe answer some questions along the way. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you. It's not every day that we get to talk to somebody who has such a deep background of wildfires and wildland fires. And then not only a deep background, but then extensive experience on the ground working on the incident management teams. This is a perspective that we don't get every day. So I really appreciate you coming on with us.
You bet. Anything I can help.
Yeah, no worries. So why don't we start with what got you into incident management, emergency management? What got you into this space?
Oh, man, it actually goes back all the way to 2003. I had just made captain on the fire department. And in 2005, the department that I was on, they actually adopted NIMS as their standard. And I was like, what the heck is that? Because I had no idea. So I spent the next following years all the way up until, 2013. I went to the National Emergency Training Center in Emmitsburg, Maryland, 10 times, just for different specific courses, trying to get that next level up of certification. And it really showed me the value of what the system is. And so that was really my driving force to get into emergency management, is because it's a skilled trait that a lot of people should know, but a lot of people don't know. So the reason for my consulting company is to kind of share that knowledge and to bring jurisdictions kind of up to where they need to be, because the goal is we want to help, right? That's what we want to do, And so that's really what got me into that emergency management field, was just one, a requirement as a captain to go, but then seeing the value of the program and how good it can do for you. That's really what got me started in it.
It just kept you going back, huh?
It did, yeah. Yeah. So now we're 21 years into that now?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's great. And you actually became a NIMS instructor, right? And you're actually certified to teach some of these courses and to really bring people from all around the nation together to get them up to standard, right?
Yeah. So FEMA has a course that's called ICS 449, which is a instructor curriculum course. So I took that course back in 2009, and I've been teaching NIMS ICS since that time period. Yeah. So I'm the primary contractor for the state of Montana when it comes to NIMS ICS training. And so, yeah, I bounce around the state and sometimes around the nation.
Wow. It's really impressive, actually, because it's rare that you find somebody who has such a passion for this type of thing. Mm-hmm. And then, because sometimes being on the incident management side, you're kind of separated from what got you here to begin with, right? So being a
Mhm.
firefighter, being a fire captain, and then moving to the incident management side and kind of creating that separating boundary. It's got to be interesting to be on that side where now you can see everything.
Yeah, it's that 30,000 foot view. You know,
Right.
fortunately, I come from the background of I've seen the 3 foot view. I've been the hands on, and so as I progressed through my career and I've gotten to where I am now, even though I have that 30,000 foot view, I still know what the 3 foot view looks like.
Right.
Because I have that different perspective.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
so I want to kind of drill into that a little bit, right? Because you work for an incident management team.
correct.
And because you're with the incident management team, you guys are actually representatives of the state of Montana through the DNRC, right? The Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, right?
Yeah, they are our sponsoring agency. Yes.
And so kind of walk us through what makes up an IMT. What is it comprised of? Obviously, you're the liaison. So
Mhm.
to me, that means that you are outward communication, right? But these teams aren't small teams. It's not 3 or 4 people.
No, I mean, so every official incident management team is going to have a minimum of 8 command and general staff positions. That's the top 3 and the bottom 4, 5.
Okay.
And so, depending on what size of team you are, typed like type 3 or a complex team, will really determine how robust each position in that team is. So, like, you're going to have 1 or 2 incident commanders. I might have myself as a lead liaison officer and 5 assistant liaison officers.
Wow.
Same thing with safety. Safety might have 1 primary safety officer and then have 5 or 6 or 8 assistant safety officers.
So we're
So,
actually talking, upwards of 20, 30 people sometimes, maybe even larger, depending on situation.
going off the top of my head, with all the command and general staff positions for my specific Type 3 team, I think we're rostered at right around 50-ish,
Okay.
50
And
to
so that roster, is it a full deployment roster every time you're called to deploy?
pretty much so, yeah. So we do a weekly check-in on a Sunday night. Everybody logs in. They say what their availability is for the following week. Does everybody go every time? Absolutely not. But we make sure we deploy with enough to get the job done,
Gotcha.
if
So
that makes
okay,
sense.
so yeah, so you could move with 30 this week and 25 next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
Okay.
that's completely up to my incident commander what that looks like. If we have the eligible or the available personnel, and then we get a dispatch to go to an incident, then he will look at 2 things. He'll look at the incident and he'll look at the availability of the team. And we either can do it or we can't. And so that really falls on the back of my incident commander.
Okay, got it. And so moving to into like sort of what the difference might be between an incident management team and a complex management team. The complex teams, they work more on a national level, right? We've talked about that before where I was surprised to learn that they work at a national level, but they're not federal. So they will come in and take over an incident from you or another IMT should the circumstances require it, correct?
Yeah. So in 2022, that they started taking a look at how the Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 teams in the nation were made up, and they made the decision to transition all Type 1 and Type 2 teams into complex teams. Okay, complex meaning how challenging or how difficult is the incident that we're dealing with. And so kind of your Type 1 and your Type 2 teams merged into complex teams. And
Okay.
so now, if I'm not mistaken, there's 44 teams throughout the nation in different regions of the United States.
Sure. So
So
they're broken up Southwest, Northwest, East.
yeah, Northern Rockies, Central Basin, stuff like that. Yeah, so those are your old Type 1, Type 2 teams that have now merged into complex teams.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then I just want to be clear for anybody that may be watching this that just because a complex team is assigned, say, to Southwest, doesn't mean they can't be deployed to the Northern Rockies should there not be an available team there, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So it actually happened this year. So our Type 3 team was deployed out to the Remington fire, which ended up being a 196,000 acre fire. But they called a complex team, the state of Wyoming did, because that's where the fire started. They called in the complex team out of the Southwest region 5. So they came in under Wyoming's request, and they took over the Remington fire from us because I believe there was 5 other fires that were going on at the same time, and it warranted a complex incident management team. Yeah,
Okay. And
so we were
and if
really
it's if I remember correctly, when you were headed out to the Remington fire, that fire actually spanned both states, right? Montana and Wyoming. And so
Yeah,
that
so we were
adds the
actually,
complexity, right?
yeah, we were actually headed to a different fire, and we got our orders, and we were told, all right, deploy out first thing in the morning, 0600. So as I'm driving, um, I see this huge mushroom smoke cloud, and I'm like, there's no way that's a 6,000 acre fire that we've been dispatched to. There's no way this thing's reaching 20,000 feet in the air, right?
Right.
And so I make some phone calls and come to find out the Remington fire had burned actively overnight and transitioned from a Wyoming fire across the Montana border and ran 60,000 acres in one night. And that's what I was
In
seeing
one night.
in one night. Yeah. Yeah.
That's almost unreal.
Yeah. It was just all of the stars aligned. It had everything it needed and it just ran. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get into some of the observations that you've taken away from these fires, right? Like the Remington fire being able to not only be ignited and then spread, but spread to 60,000 acres overnight, right?
Yeah.
And then create a situation where it's two states. You probably had some, reservations that were on alert as well. Then you have landowners. You've got so many moving parts to these fires and these incidents, right? So let's talk about some of the observations you've had as far as factors that may have helped it to accelerate this wildland fire. Because and I think it's important to distinguish wildland fires between wildland fire operations and maybe something that's a little bit more urban or residential,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot of difference there, right? And nuance.
Well, I tell you, one of the primary differences is available resources. You have those critical resources that need to be in place to try and shut down whatever the emergency situation is. This one specifically was a wildland fire, and it was happening in remote northeast Wyoming, and it crossed over into very remote southeast Montana. And so the lack of initial resources, um, the wind direction, the fuel load, I mean, all of these catastrophic things came into play, and it just made the perfect firestorm. You know,
Right. Just kind of
so
perfect circumstances and
yeah, I mean, no helicopters available, none flying at night. I mean, it was a mix of a few things that happened that allowed that incident to do what it did.
see, and that brings up a good point because you're saying that there's not a lot of resources available, but in those situations, you actually end up having to compete for resources with other fires and other teams that are operating at the same time, right?
Yeah, so we call them critical resources, and it's not my avenue. I don't have to deal with it. That's my incident commanders and my operations folks. I just want to be clear about that.
Sure.
But yeah, there's only so many VLAS, which is called very large air tankers, DC-9s or whatever they are in the nation. And so we do every day we do what's called a 209, which is a situational summary. Basically, our incident commander is telling the powers that be that are making in these coordination groups, say, look, this is what we have. We have this many acres burning. We have this many lives in danger. We have so on and so on. And he's trying to he's pleading his case for our incident.
Sure.
Right? And every incident commander in the nation that's currently active is doing the same thing.
Right.
They are pleading their case for their incident. And then the various multi-agency coordination systems or interagency centers, they're having to make that decision.
Yeah, it's almost like triage in an emergency room at a hospital,
It's
right?
exactly what it is. Absolutely. Yeah. So we only have these critical resources available. Who gets them? And
Right.
if we give them to you, but then something else happens, we might take those resources away from you.
See, I think that's an important point, especially for anyone who might be watching this, right? Because I
Mhm.
think what one of the common misconceptions about fighting a fire, especially at the large fire, talking about like the post fire, or in California we've had 1 million acres burned this year
Mhm.
already, right? I think one of the common misconceptions is that you guys show up and you bring everything with you, but the reality is you show up and assess the situation, and then you ask for what's available because, like you said, there's only so many air tankers.
Right.
So even if you do get an air tanker, it's going to be on a flight schedule that's prioritized also by the same
Coordinate.
triage, right?
Yep.
And so you might only have that air tanker for 3 hours on station out of an
Mhm.
18-hour day for the tanker. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's completely dependent on the national need for those critical resources. We try and keep our aircraft within at least the region, but we had a fire, I don't know, a month and a half ago where we were flying 5 helicopters, and we had a new fire start up, and they took 3 of our helicopters for the day. They're like,
Wow.
got to take your helicopters to go put this fire out so that this fire doesn't turn into another fire.
Right. And that
Another,
doesn't even consider personnel either, right? Because, if you have, your hotshot teams and your local firefighters and everything else, and the fire starts in the same county or one county
mm-hmm.
over,
Yeah,
then
now,
those resources also have to be divided, right?
yep, absolutely.
So let's talk about that, right? Talk about the resources and everything, but let's just clarify for a second. The role of the incident management team is to be on station through containment of the fire. Is that a good
Yeah.
way to characterize it?
So behind the scenes joke is we're here to control the chaos.
Okay.
We're here. We show up. It's chaotic. We're going to do the very best we can to get our arms wrapped around this thing, right? So we can at least contain it and start putting this fire out, right? And so obviously life safety is always going to be our number one priority. So part of controlling the chaos is to ensure that the public is safe, right? That's all going to be our number one priority. And the responders are safe as well. So they call us in. It's gone beyond the jurisdictional's capabilities. And so they're like, hey, we just need help. So our team is considered a fast deployment team. Hopefully some of us will start showing up within 2, 4, or 6 hours, within the state of Montana. And so that's basically what we're doing. We're showing up to start controlling some of that chaos, to help that jurisdiction out that called for the help, to try and work with the sheriff if they're doing evacuations, to try and work with the firefighters to get some sort of containment on this fire so it stops spreading. And then we'll focus on, once we get the containment taken care of, then we focus on getting, the rehab taken care of, the rest of the smoldering fires put out, so on and so forth. But the primary thing is containment.
And quite often you guys aren't actually there from the first spark of the fire to the last, the last flame being put out, right? A lot of times you're
No.
going to hand that over to the local authorities.
Yeah. So all incidents, and this is a FEMA thing, all incidents begin and end locally.
Okay.
So they started it with the fire, and with their initial response, they called in for assistance. We came in, we helped them control the chaos, we helped them get containment. And as soon as the jurisdiction feels that they're able to take over the incident, we will do a turnover of that incident, and we'll make our team available for the next one.
Okay. Got it. And so are there times where actually, I think you mentioned this just a little bit ago, times where you're actually managing more than one incident simultaneously?
Yeah. Usually we try not to do that because we're a fast attack type 3 team. We kind of like to stay within our world and within our lane. But the Remington fire was just a great example. When we showed up, we were going to the Barber fire, the 6,000 acre Barber fire. That was our assignment. But because of the events that had happened over the 16-hour period from our deployment till our arrival,
Sure.
The Remington fire had burned over. There was no teams available within the area. So they're like, hey, guess what? You're doing both.
Got it.
All
And so
right.
you just kind of have to flex. So
Yeah.
so really what I'm gathering is that, your job as an IMT is semper gumby is what we used to call it in the military, where it's like always flexible, right?
Always.
Where
Yeah.
you're never going to run into the same thing twice, basically.
Mhm. Yes, correct. You never know. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. And so I kind of want to go back to the controlled chaos part, right? You have some sayings that have really struck me as both entertaining, but really stupid simple, right? And I'm a stupid simple kind of guy, right? And one is like control your forests or your forests are going to control you.
Yeah. Manage your forest or the forest will manage you.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. Thanks for the correction on that. But what does that mean, right? Like we've talked about how you've had teams that have gone into these fires and forests with 6 or 8 feet of fuel remnants that's left over. Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I can. And let me just be clear. I'm not in operations. Okay. So I'm
Sure.
not actually out in the field, but as a team, we do discuss that, what the fire load looks like. And so when it comes to the fire load that's there, one of the primary problems that we have in Montana is we have this little bug. It's called a pine beetle, and they are devastating our forests. They are killing thousands of acres of forest, and they're now standing dead and they're primed to burn. And if they don't burn, then what ends up happening after 3 or 4 years, the wind blows them over and now they're deadfall. So now they're stacked fire loads, so that's really one of the main problems that we have here. Yeah.
And all that turns into fuel, right? Which then just accelerates
Oh yeah.
fires, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So now you're not dealing with just a tree crowning fire. Now you're dealing with a heavy fire load burning on the ground.
And
And to get that under control is, yeah, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's very challenging.
right. And so I think that's kind of where resilience efforts come into play, right?
Mhm.
Forestry management, especially with these efforts to go in and clear the forests of the dead fuel and
Mhm.
kind of try to help to mitigate some of the factors that could really take a fire like the Remington fire and shoot it over 60,000 acres in just a matter of a couple hours.
Yeah.
Um,
There's people way smarter than I am when it comes to how you mitigate that stuff. Okay. But yeah, there are some points to be made there. There's anytime you have fire load, eventually it will burn. And
and
that's just the way it is.
Right. And so is this problem like with the pine beetles especially, is that a problem that's isolated to an area of Montana? Is it widespread through the whole state? Because I know we
Yeah.
have that problem in Colorado, right? You'll see entire
Right.
mountainsides that are just, desolate because of it. So is
Yeah.
it like a statewide problem for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's one part of the forest that doesn't have some sort of effect from the pine beetles, that it's just killing off our trees, and
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. I haven't inspected the whole state of Montana, so
Sure.
I can't say that. I can tell you that from what I have been exposed to, yeah, there's shows and effects of pine beetles just about everywhere that I've been.
And that can't make it easier for you guys when you're out there responding to these fires.
Oh, anytime you increase the fire load, it always gets more challenging.
And then that means more resources, more money, more people,
More
longer times on station, right?
time, yeah, time. Because like I told you before we can turn that incident back over to the jurisdiction, that jurisdiction has to be comfortable with the idea of accepting the responsibility of the fire. And if you've got a mountainside that's got, 3 or 4 feet of deadfall on it that's still actively burning, they're like, no,
Gotcha.
no, you guys can hang out for a while longer.
Okay. And so I kind of want to pivot just a little bit though into the emergency management side and talk about volunteers, right? So I
Okay.
know that with wildland fires, especially up in Montana, you have so much just uninhabited acreage up there that a lot of these fires you don't have to deal with volunteers, but you do have to deal with landowners, you do have to deal with municipalities and stuff. And then sometimes these fires will happen in a vicinity where volunteers do show up. And I know that that can be a blessing and a curse. So can you talk to us a little bit about both of those, especially from your experience as a liaison officer?
So I need to kind of split this right down the middle here for a second. So if I have my liaison officer hat on, if volunteers start to show up, I work directly with the county emergency manager to make sure that those volunteers are managed.
Okay.
Volunteers are just like hazards. If you don't manage your hazards will manage. And volunteer actually falls into that. God bless them. We need them. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But in the liaison, I try and push that responsibility over. Now, on the other hat that I wear, my business side of it, the emergency management aspect of it, is teaching jurisdictions how to manage volunteers. Because, like I said, God bless them, we need them, but it has to be a coordinated effort. We can't just have him showing up with semis and dropping, 1,000 pallets of water off where we don't need it. So that's just one broad example of how you need to manage that volunteer aspect of every incident that's happening.
Sure. And when you're working with the county and you guys, are working with these volunteer organizations, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it can be very time consuming with communications, right? It can
Oh,
be repeating yourself over and over. You just spoke with one organization, now another's coming to find you.
well,
Um,
it's the repeating of the same information. I'll give you an example. So in June of 2022, the Yellowstone River flooded, and it flooded bad. And so we were called down to that jurisdiction down there to assist the county emergency managers to do preliminary damage assessment and a few other things like that, right? Well, the county emergency manager pulled me aside. He's like, "Can you help me with this?" And I'm like, "All right, what is this? What are you specifically talking about?" He's like, "I've got to get my people some help. How do I do that?" And so I kind of put my liaison duties just to a side. I said, "Okay, let's do this. Let's get on the phone. Let's start calling Team Rubicon. Let's start calling, Samaritan's Purse. Let's start calling these big organizations. And so we did that, and we were successful in doing so. But it was the repetitive of questions that we had to answer each time we called a different agency. Whether it's a volunteer organization active in disaster or some sort of, religious relief organization, whatever that is. They all basically had the same questions. So it was like every time. And so instead of getting everybody on one phone call and saying, okay, this is what we have, who can help? It was on the phone with this one for 20 minutes. All right, find the next one. On the phone with this one for 20 minutes. And it ate up a lot of time, valuable time.
That kind of carries over, not just with volunteer organizations, but I remember you kind of spoke with me about communication problems with landowners. Right. It can be really tough to deal with, a dozen, 2 dozen, 100 different landowners affected by either the floods or the fires or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you
And
kind of
that, and
run
that
into the
does
same
fall in my
problem.
days on Wheelhouse. Yeah, I do that a lot. The majority of these folks that are affected by whatever the disaster is, believe it or not, they do have some understanding that, yeah, this is bad, but they need to be heard. They just want somebody to sit down with them, hear what they have to say, know that they're being listened to. So that helps build their, fortify their own person so that they can push forward through it. If they feel like they're being left out there all alone, yeah, you go south pretty quick.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially if you're watching, your own land and your homes and everything else get
Mm-hmm.
consumed by these events, especially in a catastrophic way. It's got to be something that's, very stressful, and everybody's going to have a million questions, right?
Right.
Um, and so that's kind of where we got the idea for Aid Arena to begin with, is how do we help volunteer organizations talk? How do we help them talk with the right people? How do we find the Terry Baileys and the other liaison officers of the world to make their life a little bit easier and more effective, right?
Right.
And so you've been around Aid Arena a little bit. You've been watching us work. You've been kind of, tied into seeing some of the ways that we've been able to engage with
Mm-hmm.
organizations and stuff. And I just kind of want to get your viewpoint on, you know, how does Aid Arena fit into their emergency management realm?
Well, I think VOAD, let's go back to VOADs because that's essentially what you guys are. You're a volunteer organization that's activated during disasters,
Hmm.
right? You're essentially a VOAD, but you're not providing any type of tangible material, water, or anything like that. But
Right.
what you are providing is you're providing the digital virtual communication avenue that I think is missing in some of these big events that happen. Is how do we always say we need to get everybody in the same room working off the same sheet of music, playing the same tune. And so I think that's where you guys can really help, is to ensure that we can get everybody in the same room. Who cares if it's a virtual room? Let's get them in and let's get them talking. Let's stop duplicating efforts. It's time saving, it saves lives, it saves resources. If we have 5 different organizations going to the same location to provide the same amount of support because those 5 didn't talk to each other, then 4 other jurisdictions somewhere are going without. Because that's really what this is all about, is providing that support for the people who need it the most.
Right, exactly. We like to say helping people help the planet, right?
Exactly. Yep.
That's what we like to say. And then we like to say that inside of Aid Arena, we're building teams of teams, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, absolutely.
if we could have 5 teams, 10 teams, however many there are involved working as one team, that's
Mm-hmm.
the goal. And I think that that's where we approach it from. And so it's nice to also have that perspective of somebody who has 20 plus years of incident management, validating that and saying, yes, this is the way that we need to be moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do need to give you guys kudos. I was paying attention to the hurricane relief efforts that you guys were doing,
Mhm.
and you brought in some big players into your Aid Arena. I mean, you had some Team Rubicon there, some Samaritans, some quite a few
Yeah, we
organizations.
were we were lucky enough to find, some good connections in a small amount of time. And while we were fortunate to be able to help somewhat down in the Florida and Georgia areas, everybody's seeing how hard it is up in the North Carolina and Tennessee areas. And
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
yeah, those efforts are still ongoing and stuff. But but it is heartening to know that, you were able to see that and then, take some value away from that, especially as somebody who works in the incident management realm where, things are a little bit territorial sometimes. And,
They can
people
be.
have,
Yeah,
yeah, and
can be.
naturally people have their way of doing business. And when that works for them, a lot of times they're, I don't want to say immune to new ways and new ideas, but
Mhm.
they're definitely hesitant, right?
You know,
So,
no matter how old school they are, if you show them something that works, they're okay with it.
yeah.
Yeah, does it work or not? If it works, okay, let's use the tool.
Well,
If it
from
doesn't,
what I
great.
hear, yeah, from what
Yeah.
I hear is if we can convince Terry Bailey it's worth a shot, then we can convince anybody it's worth a shot.
Yeah, I'm pretty low on the totem pole, man.
Yeah, well, we either manage Terry Bailey or Terry Bailey manages us, right? So,
Yeah, there you go. Yes,
well, hey Terry, I really appreciate your time today. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that you stick around with us and that moving forward we can do some great things together. It's been such a pleasure to have you with us and to get this perspective from you. So I really appreciate it, man.
hey, you're welcome, man. Anytime, anything I can do to help. Like I said, I retired in 2014, so everything I'm doing from this point forward is for the benefit of the good. You
Just
know, it's just because I'm passionate about emergency management. I'm passionate about helping people out, and if I can help you guys out, I'm there.
Well, and same, anything we can do to help you and your teams and your colleagues, you know how to find us and where to get in touch. So again, really appreciate you coming on today. I want to say thank you to everybody who's been watching us today and whoever will watch this in the future as well. One more time, I would just like to shout out the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and their Wildfire Resilience Initiative. Without them and our partnership with them, we wouldn't be able to have episodes like we did today with Terry Bailey. So, for all of you that are out there, please stay safe. For all of those affected by the hurricane and all of those volunteering to help those affected with the hurricane, please be safe. We're with you, and Aid Arena is here doing everything we can to support and enable those organizations and those people as they continue those rescue efforts and the humanitarian efforts that go with that. And so, with that, again, Terry, thank you very much, and we'll see everybody next time.
Sounds good. Y'all be safe, okay?